as you know, in many startups, right, what you start with and what you end up doing ends up being different. So in 2016, one of our advisors told us that, guys, you should actually look at the US market for what you're doing. Video is the new GPS. So we have this feature where, the fleet manager sitting anywhere on his smartphone, tablet can open a live stream into any of his vehicles.
And what are the typical alerts that go out?
So we have a driver app. In the US, if you turn on recording without the driver's consent, it's a huge violation. Drivers' well-being and safety and the safety of the passengers is paramount, right?
Road accidents are a cause of great concern, especially in India. But here is one option to save some lives. Good morning, friends, and welcome to a very exciting interaction on Trans India, Real People, Real Emotions. India's automobile population and road network have seen phenomenal growth over the last 2 decades. The number of people driving automobiles too has seen an astronomical growth. However, along with this, the number of accidents and fatalities too have been rising steadily, and despite many efforts on road safety, the outcome has been disappointing. We have seen that the driving habits of people is getting from bad to worse, and the enforcement agencies are usually onlookers to these habits. The only silver lining to this situation is the use of technology to prevent accidents. Vehicle manufacturers and other tech companies have been coming up with devices and systems that aim to prevent accidents. Our guest today is the founder of one such startup that provides solutions to not only prevent accidents, but also to improve efficiency by encouraging better driving habits. We are delighted to have with us Soumik Ukil, CEO and one of the founders of Lightmetrics that provides video telematics. Lightmetrics has had a very interesting journey. They started operations in India, but having targeted the wrong segment, they chanced upon an opportunity in the US. Their solutions were a huge hit in the US, following which they expanded to many countries across the globe and returned to India as well. Soumik takes us through this roller coaster journey and also explains their product features. Here's Soumik Ukil, CEO and one of the founders of Lightmetrics. So Soumik, Lightmetrics started a decade back, 2015 is what I was reading.
Yeah.
How did this idea come about?
My co-founders and myself, we were ex-colleagues. We used to work at Nokia Research Center in Bangalore. And we were working on cameras, imaging, and other things for mobile photography applications, right? If you remember, Nokia used to be a very big name in mobile phones. Then, at the end of 2014, we decided that, we wanted to kind of do something different. And the idea started that, we should do something with the existing skill sets that we have, right? And, we were all first-time entrepreneurs at that point.
Right.
And it's like a hammer looking for a nail, right? So you have some skill sets as first-time entrepreneurs and with a very technical background, right? We were like, what's the problem we should solve?
Okay.
And even when we were working, we were looking at, all the applications of imaging, computer vision in automotive applications.
Okay.
And so the idea started that, nowadays smartphones are very powerful.
Right.
And they have very good cameras. Even back in 2014.
Correct.
Not as good as today, but still.
Yes, they were good.
They were good. So, the idea was, we will take these smartphones and, if you remember at that time, Uber, ride sharing, Ola, and all these companies were coming up, right?
True.
And so every Uber and Ola cab will have a smartphone with the driver, right?
Absolutely.
So our initial idea was, we will have so many, hundreds of thousands, millions of vehicles with a smartphone with the driver. Can we somehow, leverage the camera on those to capture video, do AI-driven analysis on that video and prevent accidents, help in insurance claims, efficient resolution and so on. So that was the idea, right? But as you know, in many startups, right? What you start with and what you end up doing ends up being different.
Correct.
But that was the genesis. That's what we took the leap of faith with, right, back in February of 2015.
But was trucks on your mind at that point of time?
No, trucks were not. That's a very good question, Girish. So actually, as I said, right, when we stepped out and started Lightmetrics, our whole idea was we will make the software run on smartphones.
Okay.
So the initial companies that we piloted with in the first couple of years were companies like Ola Cabs, with Zoom Car, the car rental company.
Yes.
The whole idea we were pitching to them is, already, in the case of Ola, your drivers will have smartphones.
Right.
So we can do more analysis based on the sensors and the camera. And then with Zoom Car, the idea was, you are actually owning these very valuable assets and you don't know how people are driving it.
Absolutely.
So we did a pilot where we put inexpensive Android phones.
Okay.
And ran our software and we were capturing data.
Right.
So then, it was not trucking, right? We were looking at kind of ride sharing, rental cars and all of that. I mean, very honestly, that experiment was a failure, but you learn a lot from your failures.
Absolutely,
right?
you do. Correct.
So the thing we learned is that, while there is a value proposition around safety, there are some challenges, because if you are expecting a driver to have a phone, he's going to take that phone in and out, right?
True.
So, and if you need a camera to actually do this analysis, it needs to be rigidly mounted, right? Plus, these verticals that we were looking at that point of time, while safety was critical, they had other like burning fires that they needed to solve, right?
True.
If you remember, they had this issue with, they were in a market capture mode, right?
Absolutely.
So this
safety was the least priority, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was a priority, but when as a startup, if you're working with a company and it's not a burning problem, that's not a good fit for you, right? Because when a big company will say, okay, this is a good to have problem,
yes,
you should exit, right? But our pilots taught us a lot of things, right? It taught us that if you are really serious about this, you need a dedicated camera, right?
Of course.
That is mounted on the vehicle, that cannot be tampered with. The driver cannot take it out or fiddle with it. The second thing we learned is, this kind of light to medium commercial vehicles, ride sharing, these things, that was not the time, right? But we got to know that trucking, right, or commercial vehicle operations, commercial fleet, already in the US, there is this industry which is called video telematics.
Right.
And we were not aware.
It was there, correct.
Right. And it has been there for the last 10 years at that point. That generation of video telematics was basically cameras which could record video, right? There was not a lot of smarts inside the camera.
True.
Right?
True.
And a couple of companies in the US, specifically in the West Coast in San Diego, they were pioneers and they were doing this.
Okay.
But the market was pretty significant and it was projected to kind of really explode. Right? So in 2016, one of our advisors told us that, guys, you should actually look at the US market for what you're doing.
Okay.
Right? So we actually, it was very coincidental. We met this company from the US at a conference in India, actually in Bangalore. These two executives from the US had come down. Then we kind of pitched them what we were doing. They said, okay, come over. They said, okay, this is what we like. We did pilots. We didn't end up signing with them, but then it became very clear that the US clear market is there.
Right.
So around 2016, 2017, we signed our first US customers who were basically telematics, what we call telematics service providers.
Right.
Who were working with various kinds of fleets, and we launched our first solution.
So you were providing to the telematics solution providers and not directly to the fleets.
Yes, that actually has been our business model, right, from the beginning.
Okay.
What we decided is, we were a very small company, right? At that time, we were bootstrapped.
Right.
We said, if we are going to go to fleets, you need a boots on the ground sales force.
Absolutely.
And you also need a broader product portfolio. You cannot only just do video, because fleets will need like
whole lot of
fuel
things.
tracking, management,
Correct.
all sorts of stuff around regulations, compliance, and all of that. We were not ready at that point. So we said, okay, this is what we want to do very well. So let us find partners, right, who will take us to market. And we said, okay, these companies, telematics service providers, are already selling to fleets.
Right.
Can we provide them a platform they can integrate? And then they take us to their existing customer base.
Okay.
And that really worked for us, right? Because the demand for video from fleets was growing. And we were saying, okay, we can give you a very, very state-of-the-art solution.
Right.
Making it easy to integrate into your platforms. And at that time in the US, 2017 December, I believe, there was a mandate that came in called the ELD mandate. It's called the Electronic Logging Device Mandate.
Right.
It's called the tachograph.
Correct.
In the EU, right? So it monitors the number of hours a driver drives. Right. It's also in a way a safety thing, right? Because they're trying.
That was the point, actually.
Right? Yes. So what happened was, then because it's a mandate, then millions of tablets started being sold to this fleet segment, because the ELD mostly relied on tablets and smartphones for the compliance to log.
Correct.
Right. So when these telematics service providers were basically pushing tablets to their customer base, now we figured that the tablets have a lot of compute available, right? So actually our first solution was a camera that communicated with the tablet and streamed the video, and we ran our library on the tablet or the smartphone. So actually that was a good tailwind for us, right? So our first customers, actually, we rode that ELD wave.
Okay.
And we got our first customers
wonderful
through that. So pretty long answer, but that's how we ended up into trucking.
But then how did India happen? I mean, when did you plan to come back?
That's a very good point, right? We came back, right? Because
I'm just really surprised, because US is a huge market in its own.
So yeah, I mean, usually what startups do in India is, you will test it out in India, get some traction, and then you will go.
True.
But we actually did not have product market fit in India. We were clear, right? After our experiment for 1.5 years,
right,
we were not looking at the right segment, right? And trucking, we had some conversations with Indian fleet owners.
Okay.
But very honestly, fleet owners were still adopting AS 140, right? And also that too, not in spirit, right? People were just installing trackers, not really using it.
See, 10 years back, video telematics was not even thought of by anyone.
Yes. I mean, GPS.
Even GPS was there for the heck of it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, for most companies.
That's just a checkbox, right?
Checkbox, yes. Right? Correct.
So in that landscape, telling people, okay, you have to install this camera, this service for safety, it was not really landing with the people that we were talking to. And we were probably not talking to the right people, right? But the market in India for video telematics was very small, we believe, at that point.
True.
So, and then we started looking at these other segments, and we didn't have product market fit, right?
Okay.
But basically, what does product market fit mean? That there is a burning problem that a segment has, you are providing the solution. But the US, clearly we found that, right? So we said, okay, small company, we will focus on the US.
Right.
Then what happened, what brought us back to India was just around COVID, or a little before that, 2019-20, we had a couple of Indian telematics service providers who started approaching us.
Okay.
And they said, we have some big clients in mining, in iron and steel,
right,
and they have this requirement. They need cameras, right? And we signed on our first Indian customer, who we still have, a company called Machine Max.
Okay.
Who work with all the large, iron, steel, mining corporations, and we started seeing our first success, right? So that was around 2020, 21. Like through COVID, actually, so COVID in a very strange way opened up international markets for us. So, before 2019, 100% of our business was North America.
Okay.
100%, right? Not a single dollar of revenue we were generating outside.
Okay.
But COVID, we got like inbound leads from India, from Australia, from Mexico, and people were writing to our website essentially, right? Because see, we didn't plan, right? Because we were still a small company and you cannot go so broad, right?
Correct.
But I remember we got an Australian company reach out to us because by that time this demand was actually becoming very widespread, right?
Right.
The fleets across the globe were asking for this, right? And telematics service providers were, I guess, at that time looking for a platform like ours, right? That they can embed and take to market, right?
True.
So COVID actually made us very global, right? And by the end of like 2022, 23, we were already in like 15 countries, right? And now we are in like 35 countries.
Incredible.
But at that time, India happened through this one company, then a couple of more companies we signed. And what we learned at that point, what made us come back to India was, see, in the India fleet market, as you know, right? It's diverse.
Absolutely.
Right? You have this, like what is called an enterprise fleet in the US can be like 10,000, 50,000 trucks, right? Walmart, UPS, whatever.
Correct,
right?
correct.
In India, we would consider 80, 100, 150 trucks and more enterprise fleets, right?
Yes.
But you have a lot of small owner operators, the Namakkal cluster.
70% fleets are owned by these SRTOs, as we call them, 1 to 5 truck fleet.
Right?
Yes.
Lot of them, we thought at that point were not the right segment for us to target, right? Because as we discussed, right, if they're having problems even with AIS 140 compliance, right?
Correct.
Then
this was
mind space
for them.
is not there for video.
True. Absolutely.
But what we learned from our engagement with Machine Max and other companies was certain segments like mining, right? Yes. Where mining, because if mining operations run 24/7. Right?
Yes.
Drivers are driving through some drivers are doing night shifts, right?
Correct.
They're dozing off, getting into accidents, all of that, right? So mining, hazmat, right? Oil and gas, of course, and then
e-commerce long haul. I think that's also
long haul. So anywhere there's valuable cargo, drivers are doing long hours, and then of course people transportation. We are desensitized to reading about these overnight buses getting into accidents.
Absolutely.
Drivers falling asleep, right? You look at state transportation corporations or even private bus operators, right?
Yes, it's a common thing.
Right, and that's the most valuable cargo. So we said, okay, these segments, there's a clear fit, and we will focus on companies which work in these spaces, right? So which brought us back to India, and today we are very bullish of it. And as you know, the government is also very aligned, right? They understand that India actually, our numbers around fatalities and injuries around accidents are pretty bad, right?
Bad. I mean, it's not something we can be proud of in terms of statistics.
But it's been a focus, right? That we need to use technology to kind of bring a better grip on this problem. So I think now is a great time, right? I think us having entered the Indian market in 2020, seeing that we've learned a lot, right? And now we see the demand. It's not a question of, earlier in 2015-16, we were having to convince, like we were trying to educate people. What is this thing?
Correct.
I think that phase has gone, right? Fleet owners, especially, in these segments, right? They know that this is a must-have, right?
So I think also with the youngsters coming in, that has made a lot of difference. I mean, they are aware what tech is all about.
Yes, so basically, you're not having to educate them. You're just having to prove value, right?
Correct.
Which is a good discussion for us, right? That's the discussion we want to have, right? So, I think that's been our journey. But we are very optimistic about India because, I think, like, better than me the numbers of GPS penetration. That's
the scope is unlimited currently.
Right. So Light Metrics, our mantra, tagline, whatever you call it, is we say video is the new GPS.
Right.
What we mean by that is, just as GPS technology forms the backbone for any commercial fleet operations today, right? If you look at globally, right?
Yes.
Any fleet operation, right? I think you cannot really run it without GPS.
Absolutely
today, right?
impossible.
I mean, there are some people who still try to run it paper and pencil and all of that.
Small
but they're
small
outlier,
numbers,
right?
yes.
We see that happening with video. And it's not only a tagline, it is proved to us every single day, right? Because initially we thought this is a developed market thing, that, only fleets in developed markets will pay for this technology, right? Say in the US, Canada, UK, Western Europe. Today, if you look at our customer base, right? I mean, our customer base is proving it to us every day, right? Today, I mean, of course, we have customers in India, but we have customers in Myanmar, in Papua New Guinea, of course, in LATAM, like in Chile, Madagascar in Africa, right?
Wow.
Benin, Cameroon, right? The African continent is like really just seems similar to India, right? They're really waking up to this technology. Countries that we have only seen in a geography textbook, right? And we see customers asking, requiring this technology, right? So that tells us that video really is the new GPS, right? So this thing is happening, and we are very fortunate that we are there at this moment and we need to make sure that we do justice to this opportunity.
But tell me, Soumik, it really surprises me because India traditionally has been very slow in adopting tech, especially tech which costs a lot of money also. Compared to this, how has your experience with these other countries been? Were they more open or more forthcoming to this kind of tech?
So some of the dynamics are actually very similar in emerging economies, right? So if we look at the developed economies, right? Say the US or Canada or UK or Western Europe.
Those countries, fine, I can understand.
Yeah,
but
so
these
the value
smaller,
proposition, right? So what we figured is, the way we talk to customers has to be a slight shift. Because a US fleet operation, fleet owner or a safety manager, they're very safety focused, right? Because
Correct.
see, it's a very litigious country, right?
Yes,
You
yes.
get into an accident, huge lawsuit, right?
Absolutely.
There is this concept of nuclear verdicts. Now, the highest nuclear verdicts are 50 to like 80, $100 million, right?
Oh my goodness.
Right? So it's a burning problem. So they know that, right? And then insurance costs and all of that, right? So the message you are harping on is that this is a solution. Video telematics can give you a comprehensive overview on how you are doing on safety and give you tools to address the problems that you have. Whether it's through in-cab alerts and coaching, whether it's offline like data and reports for the fleet manager, that's the message, right?
Okay.
But in a lot of the other countries, like say for example in LATAM, security is a big issue, right? Theft,
Okay.
like at gunpoint, trucks being stopped.
Oh.
All of that is a big issue, right? So things like is the driver that is driving the one that I hired, right? So authenticating the driver using face recognition, giving the ability to live stream video at any point, right? To actually figure out what's happening.
Right.
And this is very different, right? So we have this feature where, the fleet manager sitting anywhere on his smartphone tablet can open a live stream into any of his vehicles.
Okay.
Look at the road, look at the cabin, right?
Right.
But because of privacy laws in the US, Canada, Europe, and all of that, and even in Australia, right? It's actually a feature that a lot of fleets are not very comfortable adopting.
Okay.
Right? Because there's a privacy, right? If you're actually without consent recording the driver and all of that, right? So these sort of features, they have relatively small uptake in the developed markets.
Okay.
For example, we have this feature where you can also record audio. Now, for example, in the US, if you turn on recording without the driver's consent, it's a huge violation, right?
Wow.
But you go to India and you go to Brazil, Mexico, or in Africa, must have, right? You need to have live streaming. They actually ask us for, we give like 100 minutes of live streaming per vehicle per month. They ask us for more.
Okay.
Right? Because, they are used to, having a control center. People are looking at videos and all of that, right? And they want to record audio because, anything happened, right? There's a gunshot, whatever. And, believe me that, we have had captured all of these situations, right? Explosions, right? So they want to record audio as well, right? So that from a safety focus in developed markets, the focus on emerging markets is safety, but also like security, and a little bit of surveillance, right? What is happening in the cabin, in the cargo, right? Give me that real-time visibility, right? So to answer, yes, Indian consumers are very value conscious. right? I mean, of course, but that's something we see also in, say, LATAM, for example, right? And then also in Africa and Southeast Asia and other markets.
Those countries are sensitive to price.
So and that's a problem you have to accept, right? And you have to work around that, right? So the way we try to address the problem is, so one of the other things that we are pretty unique in this industry is we are, I won't say hardware agnostic, we are multi-hardware.
Okay.
So what we say is we are the Android of this space, literally and figuratively. Literally because most of our cameras run the Android operating system that we support.
Right.
And figuratively because, just like say Google created the Android operating system, now it runs on a Samsung, it runs on Huawei, it runs on Motorola, it runs on Google's own Pixel. Many different suppliers run Android, right?
Absolutely.
So similarly, right, we have third-party manufacturers in China, in Korea, in Taiwan, previously in Israel, right, who have built cameras and we support them.
Okay.
Right. So we are multi-hardware in that sense, right? One of the advantages of that is, right, now a hardware with the functionality that is needed in the US or Europe, because there's a lot of things that go on. Not only they need high-end functionality from an AI perspective, you need a lot of compliance and certifications from their networks and carriers, right? Like AT&T, Verizon, Telstra, whatever.
Right.
Now, that same hardware, if you try to sell in emerging markets, it's at a price point that
not everybody would afford. Yes.
So then, because we have a diverse hardware strategy, right? In emerging markets, we have much lower cost options, right? Like less than 50% of our developed market cameras, right, at price point. This actually is the key thing which opened up emerging markets for us, including India, right? That we could actually have tailor-made hardware solutions that could provide 80-90% of the functionality of the more powerful camera options that we have at like 50% of the price point, right?
And it solves, yes.
So that is actually one of the big reasons why we are today growing in emerging markets.
Okay.
And a lot of the credit actually goes to our AI team. So we build all our software in-house, right?
Right.
Whether it's on the device, the AI that we do on the cameras, on the edge, right? Because all our AI is happening on the edge in real time.
I mean, that's been your strength from day one.
That's been our strength, right? Because this is a critical point, right? Now we are in the age of AI, right?
Right.
But a lot of this AI is happening on the cloud, right? In this industry, you don't have that luxury, because if a driver is going to hit a vehicle in a couple of seconds, right, you have to give that alert in less than like 100 milliseconds, right? So all our processing is what is called AI inference is happening on the edge. Now, with hardware which is inexpensive, right, and so that they're inexpensive, it implies that their processing capabilities are not that powerful, right? Very modest, right? For our AI team to actually optimize our software to make our AI run on these cameras, that has been the key differentiator for us, right?
Okay.
So we're telling our customers that you can have this like lower cost hardware price point, but I am giving you 85-90% of the functionality of the higher end cameras, right? And yeah, I mean that is one of the discussion. But finally you have to convince the customer that whatever they're paying, the value they will extract out of it on a 3-year contract is much more their payback.
Absolutely.
Right? Whether it's in preventing accidents, whether it's around security, right? If they have driver impersonation, right?
Yes.
All of this, right? There are costs to all of these things, right?
In fact, Soumik, I tell a lot of these guys, when they hesitate to invest, that even if you manage to save one incident, one accident, your entire cost is recovered. The rest is all a bonus for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you asked me, right, about adoption, right? I think we were at an event in Delhi, like last month, and someone said, right, like UPI, if you look at in India and then you go to even the US or Western Europe, right, we have leapfrogged them
Absolutely.
a couple of generations, right?
Yes.
Because once you use UPI in India and then you go somewhere else, you're like, okay, they're stuck in the Stone Age, right?
Correct.
So I think we have the capability of actually taking some strides, and we don't need to be a follower, right?
Yes.
So as you're aware, the government is actually there are some draft regulations, AIS regulations that are coming in for the commercial vehicle sector, right?
Correct.
Which will mandate a lot of these technologies, right?
True.
Around forward collision warnings, lane keeping,
Right.
blind spot monitoring, and I think India really has the opportunity to have a UPI moment, right, where we actually have a really step jump in these technologies and adoption, and we do need it.
True. So before I get into a little more detail about your products and services, you spoke about surveillance. And some transporter was telling me that, ever since he installed video cameras in his trucks, the level of corruption from the officials on road, that has gone down. Would you agree with that? I mean, the officials are now a little hesitant to ask for bribe when they see the cameras pointing at them. Is that true?
I mean, I don't think we have any anecdotal or data-driven experience for that.
Right.
But, if you it's human psychology, right? You will act very differently if you see a camera pointing,
Absolutely,
right?
yes.
Like even in an apartment, if you see you have CCTV cameras anywhere, right? I think that actually drives change in human behavior, right? So it is believable.
And
right?
and I think that is something which most service providers do not focus on that, and that is a huge saving in a way.
Yes, it could be.
Because you could use it as a marketing tool actually.
Yeah, I guess in other countries, right, which is why are body cams for police becoming popular,
Correct.
right? I mean, having a recording device, it creates incentives, right, to act in a different way. So yeah, I mean, this is something that is an interesting byproduct of what we do.
Absolutely.
But on that note, right, just to show like how the government is in the mind space for these technologies. So for example, Bangalore City Police today, their Hoysala vans, right, the Maruti Ertiga van, they run our technology.
Okay.
And it's because the reason, and we won this 2 years ago. The reason they do it is because their vans are running through the night, right? And even these policemen, the drivers, right?
Right.
They're getting sleepy, getting into accidents,
Fatigue is
right?
there, of course,
right?
yes.
So if someone like Bangalore City Police can say, okay, no, I need this technology, right? I think that's a very good show of faith, right?
Yes,
and saying that, and we tell that to a lot of fleets, right? That if an organization like that mandates saying that this is something we need to enforce safety in our organization, then there's no reason why you should not be doing it. Especially if you're doing, like, as I said, passenger transportation, right? Overnight buses, yes. Bangalore, Hyderabad, whatever.
Absolutely. We will continue our interaction with Soumik on the other side of this very short break. You are watching Trans India, real people, real emotions.
मुझे ये बताते हुए बहुत खुशी हो रही है कि हमारी कंपनी पीके ट्रांसपोर्ट ने 300 नए ट्रक खरीद लिए हैं। यस।
लेकिन सर, हमारी कंपनी ये ट्रक बेच कब रही है?
क्या?
सर, मैं ट्रांसपोर्ट टुडे से हूँ। मार्केट में खबर है कि आपने 300 नए ट्रक्स खरीदे।
हाँ।
तो सर, ये ट्रक्स आप बेच कब रहे हैं?
कांग्रेचुलेशंस कुमार साहब, 300 ट्रक लिए हैं आपने, बधाई हो।
तो बेच कब रहे हो?
अरे भाई, हर कोई मुझसे ही क्यों पूछ रहा है कि मैं अपना ट्रक कब बेचूंगा? आपने भी तो ट्रक लिए हैं ना, आपसे कोई क्यों नहीं पूछ रहा?
क्योंकि आपने खरीदे ही हैं बेचने के लिए, तो लोग तो आप ही से पूछेंगे ना। मतलब ये कि मैंने खरीदे हैं महिंद्रा ब्लेजो, जो दे ज्यादा कमाई पहले दिन से, साल दर साल, और ये दे किसी भी और ट्रक के मुकाबले 10% ज्यादा माइलेज, सर्विस और स्पेयर का खर्चा सबसे कम, दो सर्विस गारंटीज और IMX टेलीमेटिक्स का भरोसा। तो कुमार साहब, मैंने ट्रक बेचने के लिए नहीं, I mean रीसेल वैल्यू के लिए नहीं, प्रॉफिट वैल्यू के लिए खरीदे हैं।
क्योंकि अब रीसेल हुआ पुराना, पहले दिन से प्रॉफिट कमाने का है जमाना।
तो कुमार साहब, सोच बदलो, तकदीर बदलेगी।
महिंद्रा ट्रक एंड बस, सोच बदलो, तकदीर बदलेगी।
Welcome back to Trans India. Real people, real emotions. We are delighted to have with us Soumik Ukil, CEO and one of the founders of Light Metrics, as he takes us through the features of his products that saves lives. So, getting into the product, what are the different levels of services that you offer, and what is the product portfolio like?
So right now, our main product, RideView, is a platform for fleet safety, right? Using these cameras, right? So the product is a 360-degree platform, which means that there's different components, right? So there is the software that runs on the camera, which is recording the video from the road-facing camera, the driver-facing camera, auxiliary cameras.
Right.
And if you want to retrieve the video, if there's an accident, you can do that from the back end.
Okay.
You can live stream into the cameras. But then the AI is running at the same time, right? On these video feeds.
Right.
And the driver is actually getting audible alerts.
Okay.
Right. And so, the other thing is these audible alerts can be configured. So, right. So if you have a mining operation in Odisha, you can actually have the alerts in Odia.
Okay.
Right? And in Bangalore, if you have the city police, you can have it in Kannada. And you can customize it, right? You can actually customize it per driver within the fleet, right? So if you have a fleet pan-India and you have some drivers who are Punjabi, some who are Haryanvi or Rajasthani, you can actually give them audio alerts in the language that they understand. Right?
And what are the typical alerts that go out?
So the typical alerts that will go out, especially in India context, are seatbelt compliance.
Okay.
A lot of drivers, for whatever reason, right, they don't like to wear seat belts.
True.
Driver fatigue warning, right? They're dozing off, right? Driver distraction warning, right? I mean, all of us who drive, we know how much we fiddle with our phones, right? So we cannot blame them.
Correct.
But they're talking on the phone, texting, and going on the highway. So these warnings primarily are what our customers look for. But then there's other things around, like speed limits and forward collision warning alerts and all of that.
But is there anything that also enables a driver to be more efficient, kind of a coaching? Is that also part of the module?
It is. Actually, I'm glad you raised that, right? So this is the on-device part of the platform.
Right.
Then all this data is going to the cloud, right? And what a fleet manager is seeing is, he's seeing driver scorecards. He's seeing which drivers are doing well, which drivers are doing not so well.
Okay.
And which parameters they are not doing well on, right? Some drivers are texting too much. Some drivers are not wearing the seat belts, all of that, right? So then there's a coaching module, right?
Okay.
So the fleet manager can actually take the driver into a coaching session, show actual videos from that driver's driving, which is actually already, the AI will curate those videos.
Right.
And say, this is what you did. These are the behaviors you should correct. And then we monitor progress since the coaching session.
Okay.
Right. So if the number of incidents on cell phone usage before the coaching session was X, we want to see like a 30-40% decrease, right?
Right.
And if not, then they will be called again and all of that, right? Okay. So we call this the coaching module, right? And we made it very easy. AI is actually curating the videos, right, based on severity and other metrics that the fleet manager will have the conversation with the driver. And we recently launched this thing called self-coaching, where you do not even need the fleet manager to get the driver into a one-on-one session. So we have a driver app that's also part of the platform.
Okay.
Right. So the driver in his app only we will get prompts saying, this is what you did, this is how you're doing compared to your cohort of drivers.
That's interesting.
And then they will coach themselves and saying, okay, I've seen this video, I acknowledge, and we will track their performance, right?
Right.
So that's a very big part of the platform as well, right? All of these workflows. So you can generate data, right? But it's like, just to give you an example that I like to give, even if you have a fleet of 100 trucks or even 50 trucks, each vehicle is generating 5 videos a day, or 250 videos a day. So no one is going to go through that manually.
True.
Right?
True.
So it's like drinking water from a fire hydrant, right? So you're inundating the fleet with data. Data is not the solution, right? So finding the needle in the haystack, channeling that into workflows which can drive outcomes is what the platform is all about, right?
Yeah, in fact, that was going to be my next question. You know, with so much data available, even when GPS started, there was a lot of data in it. But transporters didn't know what to do with it until some of them were really smart enough to pull the critical ones. So do you help the fleet owners with more relevant data, or you simply dump it out there? Okay, this is a dump, you take
so
it.
Absolutely, right? So with GPS and similarly cameras, right? So that's why we say, after the video telematics first generation solution, we call it video telematics 1.0, there was a video telematics 2.0 generation where AI came into cameras,
right?
And AI means you're generating a tons of events. But with the example I told you, right, a fleet manager gets inundated. He opens a portal and he sees like hundreds of videos. What is he supposed to do with
Correct.
that? So we believe we are in video telematics 3.0, which we are trying to pioneer, and we say you cannot be dumping data on fleets. You have to channel it to workflows that can drive outcomes.
Right.
Whether it's coaching, whether it's triaging, whatever, right? So we are not about dumping data at all, right? When we talk to fleets about the platform, we are talking only about workflows, right?
Okay.
What can you do with the data, right? And just on that note, right? This other workflow which comes up almost naturally is, right? Now, say you have a fleet of 50 vehicles, you have installed cameras. Now, at any given point, some cameras might not be reporting, right?
Possibly, yes.
Drivers might have taken the SD card out. Drivers may have put a black tape on the camera, right? So if at any point, like 20% of your cameras are in this state and you don't know, and then there's an accident and you try to retrieve the video and you say, oh, I'm not getting any footage.
Yes.
They will be like, when I needed this platform to work for me, it has let me down, right?
Correct.
So we figured that what we call camera health and diagnostics has to be core to the platform.
Right, of course.
So we make it central to the platform, right? At any given point, we give you a overview of the health of your installations.
Okay.
And we will highlight, okay, look, this camera is not mounted correctly. This camera has been tampered. This camera has not been reporting for the last 24 hours. This camera does not have a SD card in there, right?
And so, how quick does this information go out?
No, this is almost real time, right?
Okay.
I mean, we are constantly updating it, right?
Okay.
So now we can now configure and send alerts to the email or a text message or a WhatsApp to the fleet manager, right?
Right.
So they can immediately call up the driver or whenever they come back to the depot, right, check what's happened to the camera, right? So this is like a workflow, right? So we are saying that dumping data is not enough. You need to make sure that you have a reliable and online a network of cameras at all time.
Right.
And then the data that is generated, that conversations are happening with the drivers to improve the performance. And the conversation is not, our workflows are not only about being punitive. So when you get into coaching workflow, right, the first discussion you have with the driver is, these are the things you did well.
Right.
You saw so many speed limits and you actually complied with, say, 95% of them, right? So we give them stars, right?
Okay.
And then you say, okay, these are the things you can do better, right? Because, only stick will not work, right?
The carrot has to be there in place.
And then what we have seen, the really forward-looking organizations, right? Even in India, right? They actually build reward schemes based on the data that these drivers are generating, right? So they have like ceremonies where
most of them have it.
Drivers come on stage and they accept awards and all of that, which is absolutely great, right? This is exactly what we want to happen, right? This is actually a tool for the driver to do their job better. It is potentially saving their lives.
Absolutely.
And it's not Big Brother is watching you, right? Because if you have that mindset, they will always try to find ways around it.
But do you think there's been a shift in their driver mindset also, where they're okay with these cameras? At the end of the day, it's a safety thing for them as well. Have you seen that kind of a shift?
If you're talking about an Indian context, so what we say is when this installation is happening, right? When a fleet is rolling this out, right?
Right.
We try to help them have a conversation with the drivers, right?
Okay.
A workshop with the drivers on.
Right.
There's this new technology coming in. Don't be surprised. This is what it does, right? So if you demystify it, rather than just one day they come and look at this camera recording,
Exactly.
right? That's a very different thing psychologically, right? Another thing, they're like, okay, I know what this is about. This is actually on my side, right?
You're going to spin the story that way to
Right,
them.
right. So and when people do it the other way, right? Okay, this is a mandate top down. We are going to install it, and the driver comes into the truck one day and they see, okay, this thing looking at me. They're not happy, right?
And then they find ways, to how it would not work.
If you think about it, right, we come to our workspace and one day suddenly you find a camera on top of your workstation looking at you, right? Obviously, that will change the dynamic for you, right? So we have to be empathetic and understand,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
So I think that conversation is very important.
But Soumik, now when you go to a customer to pitch for your products, which are the top 3 things that you convey to them? Safety, I'm sure, is there. What other things do you push?
So yeah, safety is number one, and continuous driver engagement through rewards and coaching both.
Right.
We built into the platform, and we also message that quite a bit, right?
Okay.
That
So
if
you manage the entire rating part also. That's done by you.
That's done by us, right? Based on the data that we generate. And efficiency is actually, this is something that we share case studies with, and there's enough studies that have been done within Lightmetrics and even outside it. White papers have been published, right? That when a driver drives safely, right? So they're maintaining good following distance, mandated following distance. When they're complying with speed limits, their fuel efficiency naturally goes up.
Absolutely.
Because it's quite intuitive, right? I mean, if you are a sort of driver who constantly gets close to the vehicle, then he has to brake, then he has to slow down, then he's again accelerating and braking.
True.
If he's like breaking the speed limit, right? Then that is not optimal on your fuel consumption.
Absolutely.
Right? So if a driver gets into the habit of driving safely along all these parameters, the natural effect is the fleet will save a lot of money in fuel, right?
True.
So efficiency is also a big part of the story, right?
Absolutely.
It's a very, very beneficial byproduct of what we do.
And in fact, currently, with trucks costing 50 lakh plus, your diesel prices have been high, and other operating costs, your efficiency is your tool to make profits.
Yeah, absolutely. And now of course the EV segment is coming up, right?
Yes.
Of course they are quite expensive right now.
Correct.
Hopefully the battery prices and everything will go down. What the interesting thing we are seeing is, right, that a lot of the EV OEMs, they're saying, okay, electrification, like connectivity. So these trucks are fully connected.
Absolutely.
And then safety, right? They're trying to bundle all of this as a message, right, in their trucks, right? Because if you're in 2025, 26 launching a vehicle, right, you need it to be state of the art, right? And today's state of the art means, of course, EVs, battery charging infrastructure, full connectivity, right? And earlier what used to happen was the connectivity used to come in the aftermarket, right? People would.
Correct.
But a lot of the trucks coming out of the assembly line today have connectivity built in.
Absolutely.
Right? From the factory.
Yes.
And then, we work with OEMs as well, and in India and other countries. Then, the push towards factory installation of cameras also, that also ties in, right? So we are seeing that quite a bit now.
But Soumik, like, Tata Motors has their Fleet Edge platform, Eicher has Eicher Live, Leyland also has a platform. Now, if somebody buys telematics from them and they want to add on the camera part from Light Metrics, how seamless is the integration?
So we work with a few OEMs, right? The most seamless integration would be if you buy a new truck and you selected a checkbox, then there's most of our OEM integrations have a post-assembly line fit.
Okay.
So they've created a separate housing for our cameras and they've fit it, right?
Okay.
I think that would be the most seamless, right?
Okay.
So when you are buying the truck itself, you
Pick it up then and there.
Pick it up as an option, right?
Right.
Like when you're buying a car, right? You can select. Then, it's
yes.
fully integrated and then, you're good to go. But if it's a truck that you already bought, say from Volvo Eicher or Tata Motors,
Yes.
then, unfortunately, it has to be a side-by-side installation, right?
Okay.
So, of course, we are trying to work with all the OEMs where, as you said, Tata Motors has Fleet Edge and whatever. An integrated single pane of glass view, if we can give them, right? That's actually best for everybody, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So some of the upcoming regulations, as I said, the AIS regulations are pushing these OEMs to actually not only consider, they seriously have to comply with it. That's an opportunity for Light Metrics and other companies in the space.
And Soumik, how much are the customers now pushing for video telematics? I mean, we have, okay, the government has norms. The transporters are also, okay, some of them want to do it. Is there a push from the customers that comes to you that, okay, I want from all my vendors to have this? Do you see that traction coming in?
So the fleet owners, right? The fleet...
The customers, the end user.
The end
the
users,
enterprises,
the
yes.
enterprises who are shipping, who are basically using these transporters to carry their goods.
Do you get inquiries from them as well?
Honestly, not as much. But what happens is we get it indirectly, right?
Okay.
So they will mandate it, right? Say a DHL or whatever, right?
Yes.
They will have a mandate that they will communicate to
their vendors,
their third-party transporter network, right?
Right.
And they will say that you need to have a camera service which has these functionalities,
right,
for you to actually carry for me.
Okay.
Right. So then and often they will list Light Metrics and other suppliers.
Right.
And they said you can pick between any of these. These have been certified by us. Okay. Right. So sometimes they will do it like that. For example, Tata Motors, right? They are very, very stringent, right? They will say that you cannot put your vehicles on my network unless you have cameras, right? So yeah, sometimes they will pre-certify us and then but they cannot finally be responsible for it.
True.
They will say that you need to comply with this.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't know if you would want to answer this question, but I'm still putting it up. Typically, what would be the cost of a camera setup? Software, hardware, everything for a fleet owner. I'm sure there are variations, but what is the range like?
There is a range, as I said, right? There is a range, and the range exists because at the very bottom end, you want at least a two-way, right? Two-way camera, right?
Correct.
Road and driver, right?
Right.
Now, our least expensive camera with all the AI that is relevant for the Indian conditions that we support today, it's anywhere between 12 to 14,000 rupees plus I think GST.
Right.
And then we have the service on top of
Correct.
that, right? And the service depends on what you actually want, right? You can want a recording device which can do braking, acceleration, accident detection, and all of that. You don't want the AI-based alerts, right? Which comes in at a couple of ₹100 per month, right?
Okay.
And then as you add on, it goes up. But usually what we try to do is, right, so we have financing partners in India as well, right? So we will give an option that, you actually don't pay for the hardware upfront.
Okay.
So, you just pay a, single flat price, everything included on a 2 or 3 year contract.
Okay.
Right? And that brings it to a level where, fleet is okay. They don't have to do a lot of CapEx.
Right.
and they can pay a monthly outlay, like anywhere between 1,500 to 2,000 rupees a month.
Which I think is peanuts considering, I mean, as I said earlier, one incident save and you've recovered your cost.
Yeah, but see, unfortunately, this is a discussion we need to have and convince them, right? But
They're hard to convince, actually.
Yeah. I mean, but that's if you want to play in this market, right?
But tell me, Soumik, 10 years back and today, do you see a change in mindset where people are more acceptable and more receptive to these kind of things?
100%. So, for example, at the event in Delhi, which you were at also, right? So, I interviewed the CTO of FreshBus, right? And you see this new generation of management at all these quote-unquote transport companies.
Correct.
They're technologists, engineers, very familiar with technology.
Yes.
They want to actually lead with technology, right? And for example, in this case, they are carrying people, right? The drivers.
True.
So the drivers' well-being and safety, and the safety of the passengers is paramount, right? And they want to use the best technology that's out there to solve it, right? So that has been a change, right? That sometimes we have seen these are all family businesses, right? When
Most
the
of them,
next
yes.
generation
Correct.
comes in, right? They have seen the world. They have worked in other domains as well. They came into the industry after, say, working in consulting and other things.
Right.
So they are very, very open, and they are actually keen, right? And they're actively on the lookout for solutions, researching it. Of course, financing and budgets is a discussion.
That's a separate part of it, but yes.
But they want to have the best solution for their fleet, right?
The intent
that is a
is
change.
there.
No, that is a big change, actually. I think it's also a generational thing, right?
True.
That new generation coming in.
I mean, I can't imagine you going to a 60, 70-year-old transporter and saying, boss, I'm giving you a video graphic, he'll throw you out.
So actually, as an interesting anecdote, one of our sales engineers, so his father runs in I think Ranchi, he runs a small fleet of trucks, I think 10, 15 trucks.
Okay.
So we told him, right, at least can we have a in-house fleet? Can we use your father's fleet? So he said, my father will never. He's still doing it on pen and paper and doing it. So, I mean, of course, it's a generational thing.
Absolutely. True.
Yeah.
So, the last question, having come so far, how do you see the future and what are your future plans? More so with India in the center of, the things.
So broadly, our future plans is, I'll come back to what I said, right? Video is the next GPS.
Right.
Still scratching the surface even globally. Even in developed markets, right? You will have low double-digit penetration, right? It's not like GPS where like 80% of the market, 90% of the market
It has
penetrated,
it.
right?
True.
So we have work to do. But in India, first of all, penetration is low. But with the tailwinds of these government regulations come in, more awareness, I think we want to do justice to this opportunity.
Okay.
So the next few years in India, for example, we see growth, of course, in the fleet market. We see for us more OEM integrations.
Okay.
So factory, post-assembly line installations, dealer fit options.
Right.
And 2 to 3 years down the line, I mean, we would like to see a world where, like most commercial vehicles being sold in India, right, especially above a certain tonnage, they come with an option, right, that a fleet can say, okay, I choose this option, right, whether it's from Lightmetrics or whoever else, right?
Right.
And I think the intent is there, right? Now it's about execution.
Absolutely. And Soumik, in terms of tech, do you see more, I mean, what further development can happen, especially with AI getting more and more, into use? Where do you see this going?
No, that's a very interesting thing. And, all of us are consuming the news about the way AI is growing, expanding, right? And it's overwhelming at times.
I mean, your backend team would be super excited and busy with that, I'm sure.
Yeah, excited, overwhelmed, everything, right? Because we are living in an unprecedented age, right?
True.
I mean, just the capabilities.
Correct.
So for us, it's actually a very interesting challenge, right? Because your average fleet manager does not care whether you're using OpenAI or Claude or what you're using and all of that, right?
True.
But just like, for example, we have found some magical things that AI can help us do today, and our mind is blown, right? That we could not do 3 years ago, right? Whether it's, I don't know, drafting emails, presentations, a whole lot of things, right? We have had this wow moment, right? So we are like, for their daily life, for their workflows, what are the wow moments? And there are some things we just launched and we are launching over the course of this year, right? Which we hope will be wow moments for them, right? So for example, one of the things is, fleets always used to say, so we have some reports, right? Some safety reports that automatically get generated and etc. But a fleet will always say, okay, I need this also in the report. I need that also in the report. And then, okay, in the earlier paradigm, we would have to take it back to the product team, engineering team. They would develop, they will make these adjustments. But you can never keep everyone happy, right? Because every fleet manager, they will need different
customization is different. Yes, correct.
So now we have this concept of custom reports, where through natural language, and we will probably open it to Indian languages as well. So you can actually say, right? So for example, just to give you an example, my terminal in Delhi versus my terminal in Mumbai, the month of February 2026, how did they compare? See, this is a report we would have never thought about, right?
Right.
But now they can actually type this in. It will go back and AI will actually figure out what query to do and create a report and do a visualization and send it to him.
Wow.
So we are hoping that some of the, and there are a couple of other things as well, right? So for example, now we have an installation app as well, right?
Okay.
And installation is very critical, right? Because anyone can install a GPS tracker or a AI, right? That's not, but a camera, you have to be
It's very specific. Yes.
specific, right? Especially for the AI. So as the installer is installing, right, in real time, you can give feedback. See, camera is looking too far up. You have to put it down.
Okay.
Right? We already did some of that with AI. We're actually supercharging it, right? So some of these things, see, you want that wow effect to happen, right? Because otherwise it's just one more thing, right? True. So that is a great opportunity. So we are so basically, but we are always being cognizant who's the end user, right? Because doing a showy gimmicky thing, adding another chatbot is not going to really make a difference to anybody. True. So we are doing these things which actually can make a difference, right? So we are very.
But Soumik, will AI help in bringing down accidents? Do you see that happening?
I do believe it, right? So first of all, we have been doing AI even before this Gen AI wave, right? Our AI has been embedded in these cameras, and AI is preventing accidents, right? That is undisputed, right? But with this new AI technologies, right? Our ability to coach drivers effectively, create more effective safety analytics, that has expanded, right? So yeah, AI has been preventing accidents. I think that will only get better.
We'll have a greater impact now.
We'll have a greater impact.
Thank you so much, Soumik.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Lovely talking.
Given that our driving habits are not getting any better on our own, technologies like video telematics come as a handy assistant in making sure that we have our eyes and attention on the road. Video telematics is a proven technology that has helped in preventing accidents and at the same time has been useful in picking up the right culprits in an accident. There are also instances where officials hesitate to ask for bribes when they see a camera. So here's a good reason for transporters to use video telematics. Soumik and Light Metrics have come a long way in cementing their offerings in multiple countries, and they are looking to further enhance their products and technology to help in reducing accidents. Let's work together and save lives. That's it for this week, but do come back next week for another interesting interaction. You have been watching Trans India, real people, real emotions. Until next week, stay safe and drive safe. Jai Hind.